International Media TV. Television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
My guest today is Jerri Lange, and we're going to focus on her book, Jerri, A Black Woman's Life in the Media. Jerri Lange has had a wealth of experience in television, both in front of the cameras and behind the scenes. Between 1969 and 1979, she was host of a number of television programs, which focus on community issues at KEMO, KBHK, KGO, and KQED, where she also served on the board. Her colorful career yielded numerous awards in the field of broadcasting. As a professor of broadcast communication arts at San Francisco State University, she taught broadcasting and affirmative action, women in media, and writing for radio and television. She also lectured a graduate class in communications at Stanford University. She was granted an interview with Professor Arnold Toynbee, historian and member of the Royal Institute of International Studies in London. Her credits also include special correspondence in Africa for the San Francisco Chronicle, where she worked as an editorial secretary for 3 years. After turning her talents to public relations, consulting and editing and publishing a magazine, she left California for Honolulu, Hawaii, where she became a writer, producer, and host of KHET-TV. She also published, designed, and created a unique multicultural magazine entitled Amber Star in 1985, celebrating and valuing diversity, a common thread throughout Jerri's life. She lives in Oakland, California, and we're in her living room at this time conducting this interview. Jerri, I want to get started by asking you, how did you get your start in media, and what were the difficulties and challenges you faced because you were a black woman?
You know, it's one of those things where sometimes you don't get what you go after, you just sort of back into it. And I had gone back to college at age 37, and pardon me, age 37, I went back to college, and I had 3 children, and it was kind of difficult, but I'd started out to be a social welfare major, and I took the entrance exam and got 98.2 in the entrance exam, and they said, well, you're not going in social welfare, you're going to be a writer. We're putting you in, making you an English major. And of course, my first course was in English literature, and I thank that counselor forever because she said, you're a writer. So I found out later, as I pursued that profession, one of the things we had to read were the top 10 writers in the world. And just doing that one course expanded my world so much. It's true that you can be taken out of wherever you are and you can fly to wherever you are as soon as you open the covers of a book. I had always been an avid reader, but once I found that I could have the profession of reading, I went into English literature, and that took me over to the Chronicle, which then took me to this mayor's office of San Francisco. Going back to school changed my life. And of course, when the mayor decided that he would only run for 1 term, everybody had to leave and find another job. And there was a television station being signed on in San Francisco for the first time. And they said, why don't you go over and ask them for a job, because they probably could use your political know-how in San Francisco. I went over and applied for public affairs director and got the job. And that was my first job in television.
Well, I understand there was a picket the NAACP initiated to get a black person in the media at the Chronicle.
No, that started at the Chronicle. Okay. This is what happened. I was working for Jewish Community Relations Council in San Francisco. That was my very first job in San Francisco. And the NAACP picketed the Chronicle because there was not a black person in the editorial section. They wanted them not in the other departments of the paper. They wanted someone, particularly a black woman, in the front, up on the city desk, where the city desk is, in the middle of things. You see, they always keep us out of the center of these things. So there had been very few black people. There was only 1 guy on the Reuters desk at that time. And Copy Boy was there, but no one actually there with the where the editors and the reporters were doing the jobs. So they looked around for 4 months. I was finally interviewed, and I got the job. And I was the first black woman in editorial at the San Francisco Chronicle, and I worked for 3 columnists, and the executive editor was Scott Newhall, who has written the introduction to my book. And Scott Newhall became one of my mentors. He was just wonderful. And he made the path easy, because you can easily be discriminated against in a newspaper. When you work for the top man, and he asks you every morning how things are going, nobody bothered me. So I was very thankful for that. And Scotty remained my friend for life. And he died recently, back in 1990, actually, and just a wonderful man. And you find these people along the way that make a difference in your life, and he made that difference. From there, I went over to the mayor's office, and then when the mayor didn't run, I didn't know where I was going to work, and I had made a lot of friends, and they said, why don't you try to get into television, which I had never even thought of. So I went over and got the job. It was not an on-the-air job. It was a public affairs job. But it gave me the background that I needed to know what the media was about, what they were trying to do, and it gave me really a one-upsmanship on for the next job I got, which was I was called over to a larger station, which was a KBHK, and there I was asked to be public affairs director and do a half-hour television show every single day, which I did for 4 years.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah, that was. So I've really been lucky about.
Well, I think that story you just told really speaks to how important mentors are. Also,
I couldn't have made it anywhere, Johnny,
right,
without a mentor. But I've had, as you know, when you read my book talks about Horace Caton, who was the first black reporter for the United Nations. Fantastic man. That back in those days when we had the WPA, they sent all those black writers over to Paris with Paul Robeson, Arna Bontemps, Richard Wright. Horace was in that crowd. And when I met Horace, he became my mentor and told me the whole history of what they did in Paris in those days, why black people were accepted in Paris, why they loved it, the recognition they were given. And it was just a wonderful introduction to Paris. I had never been to Paris, which I have later been to Paris, but it was a bird's eye view of what happened during those 1930s when there were no jobs. And that project sent these black men over there, and they were never the same. And one of these persons became my mentor. And he came out here when I met him to become a sociologist at the University of California at Berkeley. And it was there that he stayed out here and became my mentor. And he was so glad to give me the information. He just wanted to know what questions I had. And I had plenty. And I found out there the ties between how further ahead sociologists are than we are in the major universities. For instance, in my book, I talk about Horace Caton telling me what sociologists knew in the 1990s. Well, he was talking about the 1960s when I met him, that by the 1990s, only 20% of the population would be working, and the other 80% would be looking for jobs or working for the people who had jobs, the working elite. They already knew that the computers were coming in, that technology was going to take us to a place where there would not be jobs as we know them. Now, that's information they had 20 or 30 years in advance, and he gave it to me, and I put it in my book. And there were a lot of other things that he told me about where the sociologists can point to the changing of our sex mores, and they know exactly where you're going 10 and 20 years ahead of time, because they can see the trends in a way that we can't see them. And here I was sitting at the foot of this man for all these years, and he was telling me these trends as they were happening. For instance, about women that were supposed to be homemakers not being allowed in the workplace, and they were stagnating in their communities, in the suburban communities. They were becoming alcoholics, and later we find out that, of course, we had a lot of alcoholism and drug addiction that we didn't know about that was being kept quiet
amongst women.
Amongst the women,
yes.
And with the one man that did a play on it, which maybe some of our viewers may remember, The Gingerbread Lady, was a play by Neil Simon, who usually wrote comedies. But he wrote the story of Maureen Stapleton, well-known actress. But in it, he portrayed the secret of the women who appear to be affluent with time on their hands and husbands, who are making money and
everything is good.
And we envy them when they come out.
Right.
But he went behind the scenes
to see what was really going on.
Yeah, he showed us as we see her every day with her fur and everything else, and then he showed her in that play as she was drinking and playing the piano and banging on it and maybe in tears, and the hardships that she really went through. So America was not ready to see this kind of image, you see. And so these were the things that Horace gave to me, the real stuff behind the fake stuff.
Right. One of the things I really love about your book is that you talk about people, this guy Horace, for example, that I didn't know about. And I love learning these things. Being a black male, I can remember getting to the martial arts and reading about a black person who was in the martial arts. And one of the reasons I think I got into it, because I saw a person who was like me. And, and your book points to those. And this is a perfect segue for us to talk about. You talk about in your book about television being the theater of the mind and how it shapes our reality. You term it magic. Talk about how television, the media for that matter, shapes our reality, the power of the media.
Well, first of all...
I love that segment, first of all.
Yeah, thank you. There's a book called The Hidden Persuaders by Vance Packard. So I'm not saying it, he's said this. That in the 1950s, the media moguls paid millions of dollars to B.F. Skinner, whom you remember, the behavioral scientists, B.F. Skinner, and other people. They paid to find out how to get into the minds of the people so that they would buy their products. That was what they said they wanted to do. But Vance Packard knew what they really wanted. To take it one step further, it would be getting into your mind and not only having you find out how to buy their product, but how to get at your mind to change your behavior, to change how you think. And it would go far beyond buying products. And that's what's happened, and no one has ever admitted that to this day. But we have been under mind control in many ways, through the media most of all. For instance, and I will give you a perfect example, wars used to disturb people. When you saw someone shot, you would be disturbed. You look on the news now and you see terrible things on the news. People being shot, and we're having dinner. You're having dinner because it's no longer disturbing to you because you see it, so much of it. And we've looked at some of the shows that are coming on now. The shows that we see where you used to see a man fire a gun and shoot at somebody, and you'd maybe see a little trickle of blood, just a little bit of blood. Now, they take you into the lab, open the body up, show you everything there is inside the human body so that you get desensitized to seeing a man whose head is blown off. So you have to ask yourself, why am I being forced to look at this? And so that's the question you have to answer. What are we being prepared for? So the other thing, of course, I call the reality shows, which have people eating all manner of bugs and strange foods because they can't find things to eat, and they're afraid and they're terrorized in a country that is the most powerful country, well-fed country in the world, and yet they're putting us all into these impoverished positions. Now, we know there's poverty in the world, but we're not doing anything about that. We're just trying to make everybody else impoverished instead of saying, let's make you a better person so we can share what we have. We don't have any shows about sharing. So what I'm saying is, this tube that we look at, whether it's soap operas in the evening or in the morning, whether it's series of different series that we watch, they are having the actors read something that has been written, produced, and directed by somebody else that you cannot see. And that's the main thing to know. The words that come out of the characters' mouths do not belong to them. They belong to the people who put the dialogues within that series. And when you realize that you're being programmed by people you cannot see and by these beautiful, glamorous people who are delivering this thing, you have to know there's a difference there. And that's the trade-off that happens. so that you don't know what you're looking at because you're not seeing it as it really is.
So art imitating life is not a truism. That is something that the media created.
That's right.
You know, years ago, I used to like to watch wrestling, but I never at one point said, you know what, I want to have a guy bring in a bat and hit somebody. I want to have them take a woman and denigrate her. It never occurred to me. And they make you think that people think of these things and come to them and say, let's do this. I'm going to recite some names, and I want you to tell me about your experiences with them. I'll just have a handful.
All right.
Arnold Toynbee.
Well, you know, this man changed my life. There's no question about it. You know, I didn't realize no one had seen Arnold Toynbee in years. I had been asking to see him. And of course, I had letters going over there to the embassy so that I could even ask to see him, you know. But they said, well, nobody sees Arnold Toynbee. He's been in Japan, and he's had a heart attack, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, you know, I'm just going to ask because all you can say is no, and you won't hurt my feelings, you know. And so I asked, and they said, well, we'll let you know. And so they sent me a letter and told me to send a letter to him out in the country. They have a country home and a place in the city, which they call their home office. And I enclosed a letter, a speech I had written, Blacks in Broadcasting. And I didn't realize that he saw something in the speech that I gave before 400 broadcasters in San Francisco and the book that he was writing with Daisuke Ikeda in Japan on the actual, what we're talking about now, we're saving the planet. We were talking about saving the planet 30 years ago and nobody would listen to us.
No one was listening.
No one was listening because of my Indian blood and my African American blood and so forth. My speech was all about desecration of the land, that we've plundered it and not respecting our natural resources, all of that. That was in the speech. I didn't know that he had been writing about that at the same time.
Oh, that's great.
He called me at my hotel the next day after he got the letter, and he said, I want to see you. And he says, can you come tomorrow? And he seemed excited. And I got upset because he started interviewing me, and I had gone there to interview him. But right away, we hit it off, and I spent 2 hours with the world's greatest living historian. And he became such a wonderful person, wrote a lovely letter to me, recommending me to sit on a seat that was coming up on the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. And I have that letter. It's been framed, and it's now in the Berkeley Historical Society. So that's my thing with Arnold Toynbee. It was wonderful.
Sammy Davis Jr.
Well, Sammy Davis Jr. What a wonderful young man he was. And I've just gotten a recent book on him that just broke my heart. People took his money. He died a pauper after making $50 million. And it just... Sammy Davis Jr. confided to me that he had never been to school, which meant he did not know really how to correctly read or write. And a lot of people didn't know that he was so bright, so talented.
He was brilliant.
When it came to going to school, he did not go to school. He was born almost in a suitcase, but as they used to say on Broadway. And his mother had left the family and is raised by his father and his uncle. And but he had so much talent that, and he became a dear friend and gave me a lovely gold bracelet, by the way, which as a token of his esteem.
Shirley Maclaine.
Shirley Maclaine and I hit it right away because Shirley Maclaine is a wonderful, true human being. And I couldn't believe how she had made it in Hollywood because, you know, you got to be real phony. Nothing phony about Shirley.
She made it big.
Oh, she made it big. And we had just a wonderful interview. We hit it off, and I sent her a copy of the book.
Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou. I met Maya when she was a dancer and a singer at the Purple Onion, Hungry Eye days when my brother was a
Here in San Francisco.
Here in San Francisco. She started out as a cable car driver. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
A cable car driver. She was a dancer and a singer.
Cable cars, cool.
Cable car, yeah. And she was a dancer and a singer and was appearing there. And my brother said, I want you to meet somebody. And I went across the street to the Purple Onion and said, this is Maya Angelou. And she was the first black woman on public broadcasting of KQED to have her own show called Blacks Blues Black. She started out with a show called Blacks Blues Black.
There were 3 people who received an award at one time. You were one of them, and there were two other very prominent, famous, well-respected journalists.
Yes.
Who were they?
It was Walter Cronkite and Mike Wallace.
And Mike Wallace.
And I got that for the Broadcast Perceptor Award from San Francisco State University, which honored local people and national people. And it's for broadcasting, I think, adherence to its highest professional standards. And I was very honored to get that award. And then at the same time, I got, that's the Broadcast Perceptor Award. And then I think the following year I got the Broadcasting Award for the show I did with Sammy Davis Jr.
You were in good company.
Oh, I wasn't.
if you were teaching at San Francisco State University today, or any place for that matter, what would you want your young students to go away with regard to what the media is about?
Well, I'll tell you what I used to tell them. I said, you know, everybody tells you that, you know, you have to learn about television. You have to learn about the techniques and how to speak properly, which is all true. You have to learn how to speak properly. You have to have your hair done right. You have to look good. You have to not threaten people. That was the whole thing. The producer says, don't threaten anybody when you're on there. You're in the intimacy of their home. And so the way I handled that was when I look into the camera like I'm looking now, I wasn't looking at 50 million people, although there may be 50 million people watching. I'm talking to one little lady sitting on a sofa on her couch, and she wants to hear something that you're going to say that's going to enlighten her life, that gives her information she needs to have. And that's the role, to me, of a broadcaster, whether you're doing a television show, you're talking with a group of people, whatever, is that this media, as Edward R. Murrow said, can teach. You're teaching people. You're taking them to places they've never been. You can sit there and you read the information and then you impart it to them. So my advice to my students was, once you know that you're looking the way you should look, once you know that you have all the protocol of what you should do, then you become the secondary thing. You must become a historian. You must become a liberated person. You must be fair when you're doing a side of a story. Do both sides. Let the people make the choice. But most of all, give people information. I tell them, what are you going to do after you get on camera? They're ready to say, cue you to go. What is going to come out of your mouth? If you haven't read anything, if you don't know what's going on, you don't know which war is being fought, what's the history of that battle, then you're just going to be sitting there looking pretty and saying very little. And that's the advice that I give them.
Nicholas Johnson, who in 1970 was chairman of the FCC, as you know, at one time a media conglomerate, couldn't own print and television, and that's changed. What is the impact now? Guys stand a chance, and is the internet the equalizer? Now you have these huge corporations that own print, they own television, and the ownership. What chance does the little guy have? And the internet is a godsend, I think. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like everything has upsides and downsides. But let me start with Nicholas Johnson. They were very afraid of Nicholas Johnson because Nicholas Johnson was the one that was guarding the American people, the airwaves that belong to the American people.
This was 1970.
Yeah, but the FCC was formed to protect the American people whose airwaves are being used, by the consumers, not by the consumers, it was coming into us, but the money was being made by both the broadcaster and the advertiser. We don't make money off of television. We use it comes into our rooms, and we enjoy what we see. Now, we still own the airwaves, but the least thing that they can do is give us information that helps us better our lives, helps us understand what's going on around us, because that is what the FCC was about. And all of the media has been given their First Amendment rights because they are informing the people and the electorate about what's going on in the world. That's why they have that right. And somehow that right has been taken away because now 5 German conglomerates own all of our publishing houses. 5 European conglomerates own most of our television stations, including BET is owned by Time Warner.
Yes,
it's no longer a black-owned station,
right.
but they have black programming on there, put on by somebody else, so that nothing is as you see it times 2. Because now it's not only as Goebbels, Hitler could not have done what he did without Goebbels. Goebbels staged a reality, and then he could just do anything he wanted with the masses because he had created the reality for them. And that's what television is being done, and now it's being done from outside our country, and that's what's dangerous.
Jerri, I don't want to conclude this interview without you having a comment about your family.
Oh, well, my wonderful children. I have some lovely children, I'll tell you. I've been very lucky. I was a single mother. My husband was an actor, and he went off to Los Angeles to pursue, because, you know, it's one of those things where he was very intelligent, highly intelligent, and he threatened people. So the only thing they would let him do, and he was very intelligent, graduated from Tuskegee University and Institute, and just had a magnificent voice. He did Greek plays, he did Shakespeare. You know, black people in the 40s, you know, when he went to Hollywood, they say, well, we have a role in one of our Tarzan movies.
He was Paul Robeson number 2.
And Paul Robeson number 2. And so my children grew up, although we were separated, they would spend the summers with him down in Los Angeles, and they watched my husband on the stage. So they had that high level. And then Ted, my son, certainly asked to go to attended the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London, and he has a beautiful film called Othello, which Hollywood refuses to distribute.
Ted Lange.
My son Ted Lange.
Who starred on The Love Boat.
On The Love Boat, saved his money, and did Othello, and that's what they did. And my son Michael is a documentarian now, and he's a graduate of UC Berkeley, political science, and he's done a beautiful documentary on Malcolm X, which is available. And my third son Jimmy is a businessman here in the Bay Area, and I'm very pleased and proud of them. And I have 2 grandsons who are documentary filmmakers.
We have 20 seconds, and you have the last word.
Oh, God. What can I say except you are responsible for the life that we lead, that you lead. We are responsible for the country we have. We are responsible for everything that we see, feel, and hear around us. So let's be responsible about what comes in our homes and changes our behavioral patterns, our habits, whether we hate or love each other, and showing our children how to solve problems not through the end of a gun, but through negotiation and through love.